Hello, Nebraska National Guard. Welcome back to the Phantom Fuel Podcast. I'm RJ, and I'm back. And let me tell you, I'm fired up for this episode. We're here to inform, entertain, and connect you with the stories and updates that matter most. Before we dive in, let me give you a quick rundown of what's coming your way. We're wrapping up our two-part mentorship series with insights from Chief Hruby and Dr. Tammy Thompson. If you think mentorship is all fluff, you're about to have your mind changed. We'll also recap the 155th Christmas party. Spoiler alert, it was epic. And finally, we'll share some exciting updates, including details about the first 5K in a while, hosted by the 155th FSS team this April. This podcast is still in its early days, and we need your feedback to make it even better. In the show notes, you'll find an anonymous link where you can tell us what you loved, what you'd like to hear more of, and what could use some tweaking. Your voice matters, and we want to make this the best podcast possible for our team. All right, let's get started. January was National Mentorship Month, and we're closing our two-part series with a discussion on how mentorship transforms lives, strengthens teams, and fosters a culture of trust and collaboration. Today, Chief Hruby sits down with Dr. Tammy Thompson to share their perspectives on the power of mentorship and how it plays a critical role in shaping the leaders of tomorrow. If you missed part 1 in episode 1, go back and give it a listen. It's a perfect foundation for today's conversation. So let's dive in right here.
The views expressed by our guests and hosts are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Air Force, Air National Guard, Nebraska Air National Guard, Nebraska National Guard, or any government agency.
Welcome to the Phantom Fuel Podcast. I am your host today, Chief Hruby, and with me, or back with me, I have Dr. Thompson, and we're continuing our conversation on the topic of all things mentorship. But today we're going to really focus in on how to be a mentor. In the military, we look at mentorship, and we talk about mentorship all the time, and we expect people just to be mentors, but we don't take the time to actually train people or give them guidance on how to be a good mentor. So, Tammy, welcome. I'm hoping you can help us with that topic today.
I am excited to do so. I spent about my last year doing a bunch of research on that very topic of how do you train a mentor. So
I'm glad we have you then. All right, so I'm just going to dive into some questions and then probably pepper you with some more questions. But what are the key qualities of a successful mentor?
number one for me is active listening. And the reason I say that is oftentimes we will pick a mentor that has a lot of experience, and they are more than happy to share how to go about doing things.
I'm nodding my head.
So I think the important thing is to really be paying attention to your mentee and understanding what their needs are and not jumping in and telling them how to do things, but to gently guide them and help them figure it out for themselves. I think that makes it a much more helpful experience for the mentee, and you're building those skills so that they no longer need you, right? They kind of know how to process through things and figure them out on their own. So I would say the active listening is probably the very first thing I think of. A couple other things that come to mind are empathy and respect. So, recognizing that that person is trying to learn and grow and really understanding where their problem is or where their challenge is at, because it can be hard for you. Maybe the challenge they're encountering is something that you dealt with, 10 years ago. So really staying in that moment to help them learn and grow and understanding, and then celebrating when they're successful, right? They're looking to you as a support system. So encouraging them and continuing to help them grow, I think becomes really, really important.
What happens when your mentee comes to you and they're looking for guidance and you have no clue?
Well, I think that's okay. There's a lot of challenging situations where we don't have the answers. And I think that's a great opportunity to start asking some of those open-ended questions where there may not be an answer right away, but it helps you reflect and think through the problem. And if you think about it, many of the decisions that we have to make we don't have all of the information. And we have to process what we're given and decide when that's enough and when we just have to make that call and move forward.
When you talk about um, having them continue to talk through their problem and ask questions along the
Mhm.
way. I don't know if you know this, but in the software development world, they have this thing called rubber ducking, where if you're a developer, you talk through your issues with the rubber duck because you're talking out loud. And so you actually end up working through your problems. And so they call it rubber ducking. So when they say, we're going to do some rubber ducking, they're bouncing ideas. They're really just talking through their problem. So very useful skill.
Mhm.
All right. So I asked, what happens when you don't have the answer, but how do you, as a mentor, especially a new mentor, improve your mentoring skills? I recently, someone asked me to be their mentor. Same thing. Extremely humbled. But I was also like, oh, really? You sure? You sure you want me? And it's like, oh, okay. How do I best support this person?
Yeah, I think one of the keys is just helping guide them through those challenges, right? And like you were saying, you don't maybe you have something and you don't know the answer, and that's okay. But get kind of into that mode of active problem solving. So don't jump into providing a solution right away. Help them solve those questions on their own, and that in and of itself will build their confidence. And that is really what you're looking for. You're trying to empower them so that they can make those informed choices.
And that skill probably takes some time in learning.
Absolutely. It doesn't come naturally. And again, Stealth Coaching book will help you through that. If you just think about asking them questions, it's a gentle way to guide them through looking at different perspectives and things that they might have missed. And really, that's all you're trying to do.
Now, we talked about as a mentee to communicate how they want to receive feedback. Now, let's talk about how you give feedback because this is something that we're not all very good at and it takes practice.
Yeah, that's another skill. Can be learned, but it certainly is difficult to do. I think for many of us, it does not come naturally.
No.
And so you really you have to know the person you're giving the feedback to. So again, we encourage the mentee to share that, but if they don't, as a mentor, I think it's really important that you kind of dig a little bit and try to figure out, are they receptive to this way? Is this causing them? I can see just by their body language that that did not go well, right? So you need to be paying attention to those types of things. Then I also think you need to look at the behavior and not the person. So take the emotion as much as you can out of it and just focus on the behavior itself and brainstorm with them. What did you do and what went really well? And what could you have done maybe a little bit differently? And if you ask those questions, then you're giving feedback, but it's in a way where they're sharing their thoughts as well. And it gives you an avenue to kind of explore that in a little bit more detail, I think.
So, what happens when they give their thoughts on what didn't go well and your thoughts on what didn't go well aren't close?
Yeah, that's when that question asking comes into play again. And you might gently say, "Well, how did you think this part went?" And get their sense of how they felt that it actually occurred. And maybe you can say, "Okay, is there another way to look at that?" Right? Did everybody interpret that in the same way? And if you think about it, when we have conversations, think about how many times like we say something that is perfectly clear to us, but maybe is interpreted differently by somebody else.
Yeah.
So kind of using that as a tool to help them come back around to maybe understand a little bit more that what they perceive may not have been how others perceive that same event.
That's a good insight. Feedback is something that, as a military, we were talking about, our enlisted performance reports and officer and performance reports and giving effective feedback and better feedback to our members. But it's always something that people struggle with because it's hard. And sometimes, do you have any tips on when you need to give hard feedback, how to prepare for that?
A lot of times when you have to give that difficult feedback, I always want to make sure that the person is ready to hear it, right? So sometimes you can do something as simple as start with a question such as, hey, I have some feedback that I want to give you that I think you need to hear, and I think it will help you grow. But I want to make sure that you're in the mindset to hear it. And if you're not right now, that's okay. Let's just set a time for the future, and we'll talk about it at that time. And that can help kind of soften it a little bit. And the last thing you want to do is have somebody come in when they're not ready to hear that feedback, or they break down in tears, or they're upset. They're not, at that point, they're not listening. And so it's not going to be very effective. So if that does happen, if you're in the middle of giving that feedback and it's not going very well, it is certainly appropriate to take a break and to come back. Now, what I would tell you is you don't really want to wait a long time because, again, their mind is going to be turning, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's going to be moving down a path that you did not intend. So you don't want it to linger, but if you need to take a break, you need to take a break, and that's okay.
How do you reapproach a conversation that you've taken a break from and then you've come back to?
I would say the best way to engage in that is just to say, hey, I want you to understand that I'm here to help you, right? That this is difficult for me to give some of this feedback, but you're important enough from my perspective that I think you need to hear this. And I think if you can help them understand that that difficult feedback is not meant to judge them, but you're trying to help them grow and move to that next level, that will make a big difference.
All right, we've talked about qualities of being a successful mentor and how to improve your own mentoring skills, giving feedback. What's the impact of actually being a mentor, being a great mentor? Or
Well, I think there's benefits. A lot of times it's a two-way street. So we sometimes think that, oh, we're in this mentoring relationship. The mentee will often think this, and they're the one receiving everything. But that's not true. That mentor is also receiving a lot of benefits. They're building their own leadership and communication skills. We just talked about how do you give that difficult feedback to somebody. And again, not an easy thing to do. And it's sort of learn as you go, right? You try things. It's going to be different with every person. But taking that time and effort to give that strong feedback is improving your own communication skills. And the other thing that I like to bring out is oftentimes the mentor is going to be somebody that's maybe a little more experienced, right? They may be higher up in the chain of command. Here's what I'm going to tell you. The higher you move up, the less you really know about what's going on because nobody wants to tell you, right? So a lot of times that mentee can give you that fresh perspective that you need because you are just too far removed from what's really happening.
yeah, absolutely.
So lots and lots of benefits to being a mentor. Just that personal satisfaction too, right? Of helping other people.
Do you find that when people are looking for mentors or when they become mentors that they're picking people or establishing relationships where they have very similar personality traits? Or do you find that they are a little bit different from each other?
So that's a great question. I'm trying to think. So one example of where people were totally different. I had a student who had a major in social work. That's where her career was. And she really wanted to do something different. She wanted to start her own business, but she had no contacts. So I've mentioned previously that I'm a big fan of you finding your mentor organically. This would be the one exception where I think you might need a little help. And she did. And so I had the opportunity to connect her with a friend of mine who had started two businesses. One was successful and one was not. So you can imagine she had a lot of information to share with that person. So in that case, they had very diverse and different personalities, but it brought out the best in each of them. And this mentee is now starting her own business very successfully. The two are still in a close relationship. They don't meet as often as they once did. So back to how do you end that mentorship role? It definitely has changed, but it's still working for them and they still remain in contact.
All right. To wrap up our topic on how to be a good mentor, do you have any closing stories you want to share on either a success story or your favorite story on a good mentor and mentee relationship?
Sure. So the first one that comes to mind is I had a student that was interested in getting into the healthcare industry. And so they found a mentor who was a healthcare executive. And this mentor was sort of my model, right? They were an extremely busy person, but one of the things that they allowed this mentee to do was to shadow them for a day.
Oh,
And you can imagine the kinds of meetings and things that that executive went through. It was eye-opening for the mentee, but it didn't stop there. This executive was hosting a conference, took the mentee to the conference, and they had a regional gathering of professionals at this conference. And they were breaking up into teams and they were leading projects for the organization. And the mentor had been working with this mentee for quite some time and decided to put him in charge of one of those project teams. So you can imagine when you talk about all things mentoring, where we're building our network, we're
yeah.
gaining experience. I mean, he had the opportunity to really learn and grow just amazingly with this mentor. Now, not all mentors are like that, and certainly not all situations are set up that would allow for that. But the fact that that mentor was that open to allowing that mentee to kind of follow him around and to learn and grow was just a wonderful experience for that person.
Oh, I couldn't even imagine being able to sit in a meeting and then walk out of that meeting and ask the person that was leading it all of the dumb questions, and it'd be okay to ask
Right.
all the dumb questions because you're learning.
Yeah, exactly. So it was a great growth opportunity for this person.
Wonderful. Well, Tammy, I really appreciate you joining us for this mini series on mentoring. We talked about what is mentorship and the difference between mentoring and coaching. We talked about how to be a mentee within the mentorship relationship. And then we ended today in closing out with how to be a mentor. So thanks for your time and thanks for joining us, Tammy.
Absolutely.
Wow, what an incredible conversation. Mentorship is so much more than just career advice. It's about creating connections, empowering growth, and building a stronger force. Whether you're a mentor or a mentee, remember that even the smallest moments of guidance can have a huge impact. All right, let's talk about the 155th Christmas party. What a night. From start to finish, it was one for the books. First, let's give a shout out to our amazing guest speaker. His message was so inspiring, and for those that couldn't make it or couldn't hear it, don't worry, we're already working on trying to figure out a way to bring him back for another event. And can we talk about the bull riding? So much fun. Who knew we had so many daredevils among us? Oh, and let's not forget about the skits. They were so creative and entertaining, and a massive congratulations to the Impressionist, yeah, we know who you are, for taking home the win. You brought the house down, and it was well deserved. To everyone who joined, volunteered, or helped to organize the event, thank you for making it such a memorable celebration. Let's keep the holiday spirit alive as we move forward into 2025. Looking ahead, don't forget to mark your calendar for the first 5K in a while, hosted by the fabulous 155th FSS team. It's happening in April 2025, and registration is free. Did I say it's free? Yes, I did. It is free. Flyers are all over the base, so find one, scan that QR code, and get signed up. This event is for active and inactive members only, and it's going to be a great opportunity to come together and have some fun. Before we wrap up, let's take a moment to celebrate some incredible accomplishments across our Nebraska National Guard. A huge congratulations to the Nebraska Army National Guard sniper team for winning a national title. Your precision and dedication are an inspiration for us all. Major General Craig Strong, our Adjutant General, shared an uplifting end-of-the-year message that highlighted our 2024 successes and looked ahead to what promises to be an exciting 2025. And also, how about those state bills signed by the Governor Jim Pillen last month? 4 key measures, including one that exempts state taxes on income earned by Guard members, are now in place. That's a huge win for everyone in our force. These stories remind us of the incredible impact we have when we work together. Be sure to follow the Nebraska National Guard Facebook page for more updates and great stories. I want to take this moment to say thank you for tuning in to episode 2 of the Phantom Fuel podcast. This show is all about connecting and informing you. Your feedback helps us do that even better. Check the show notes for the anonymous link to share your thoughts. We can't wait to hear from you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode with your fellow airmen, and turn on those alerts, because next month we'll be talking about Gig Eagle. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this can make a real difference in your personal and military career. Take care, stay safe, stay connected, and keep fueling the mission. This is the Phantom Fuel podcast, and we'll see you next month.